Welcome to the channel, I'm LNT. If it's your first time here, this channel is basically about me reviewing Marvel movies and shows. It's a new channel, I'm still finding my feet and getting used to it all a little bit, but it's just a bit of fun to keep me busy outside of work, so that's enough about me, let's get into the review. Thunderbolts is now out in cinema. I've had a chance to watch it just the once so far, and it is a very mixed bag for me. Honestly, in my opinion, it is one of the better post-Endgame films, but it's not without its flaws, and it does have a fair few. So let's get into the plot of the film. Thunderbolt starts with Yelena delivering a monologue about how she's bored and doesn't really feel like she has a purpose in life. She then jumps off the top of a skyscraper that she's sat on, which obviously with a parachute, as she is on a mission, but it's obvious already that the theme of the film is going to be around mental health and depression. It turns out she's actually having this conversation with a guard who she's tied up during a mission so that she can gain access to a room in the building and destroy evidence for Valentina, who we previously saw recruit Yelena at the end of the Black Widow film and sent her after Hawkeye. This evidence is relating to Valentina's company Oxcorp, a secretive weapons manufacturer, and more specifically their work towards creating a new superhero. Now, this seemed to be a bit less like the Hydra creating the super soldier serum and more along the lines of Vought creating Homelander in the show The Boys. Yelena ends up blowing up the whole floor containing the evidence before going to see Alexei Shostakov, or Red Guardian, her adopted father. We find out that they haven't actually seen each other in a year, meaning that they have kept in contact since the events of Black Widow, but obviously not consistently. Yelena talks to Alexei about her feeling like she doesn't really have a purpose and might quit working for Yelena. Now, Alexei's initial response to this is to ask if she can put in a word for him to start working with Valentina. I kind of can't believe that the first time he's seen her in a year and she's come to him with this kind of conversation, and that's the first thing he has to respond with. But anyway, he then goes on to explain to Elena that Natasha, although they don't actually call her Natasha throughout the film, found her purpose by helping people and being a hero rather than just being a hired gun. Yelena leaves Alexei's and calls Val immediately to ask her for her next assignment, but also asks that this be the last of this type of assignment before moving to a more public facing role. Valentina agrees pretty much straight away before sending her on an assignment to an abandoned Oxcorp facility to track down someone who's trying to steal data and research from them. Yelena gets there and sees Ghost from Ant-Man and the Wasp walking through the walls into the premises. Yelena strolls in seemingly unbothered and starts looking around at some sort of evidence there and gets taken completely by surprise by John Walker. There ends up being a four-way fight between John Walker, Yelena, Ghost, and Taskmaster from the Black Widow movie. Ghost ends up shooting Taskmaster in the head, killing her, which, although I guess would be the case prior to the film based on the trailers, I can't believe they actually did it in that way. Throughout the entire Black Widow movie, we see that she's been mind controlled her whole life, obviously scarred from the explosion that Nat caused as well, and finally being set free at the end, just to get killed immediately in this film. It just seems like a bit of a strange decision to me. The remaining three find a guy called Bob, who's seemingly a patient of sorts. He's the only survivor of Oxcorp's experiments under the Sentry Project, and he doesn't really know what's going on or where they came from. But he's just saying that he woke up there and didn't know how he got there. The team realise that they've got locked in the room and that this was a trap set by Val in order to get rid of them as they are the last bit of evidence. The room turns into an incinerator, but it has a timer on the wall inside the room counting down from 2 minutes. I just don't understand why they've put a timer in the middle of the room that has the people inside that they're trying to kill. I mean, I do it so that the show can easily show the audience how long's left to provide some sort of tension. But in terms of the in-world explanation for this, it makes absolutely zero sense, and I find it absolutely hilarious that when designing this death room, they thought, "Oh, why don't we show these highly trained assassins and super soldiers exactly how long they've got left to escape this room, so they know how long they've got left to formulate a plan?" Again, just seems absolutely stupid to me, just for the sake of a bit of tension. But they do manage to escape utilising Ghost's powers, and through Ghost realising that she actually needs their help to escape the compound, luckily. They do come into some sorts of trouble driving out of the city, out of the facility, as it has been locked down by Oxcorp security. So Bob ends up getting out of the truck, running back towards the facility and shooting up in the air in order to distract the guards and allowing the team to escape. The guards all shoot him continuously, putting a full clip in him each pretty much. Massively overkill, as they had no need to do this, especially considering they didn't actually know what he was at the time. But he gets up unscathed, and this is where Val finds out that her Sentry project was actually successful. After getting up, he shoots up into the sky and then fires fires himself back into the facility like a rocket, causing a shockwave that ends up pushing the Thunderbolts off their road in the truck. The Red Guardian luckily has caught wind of Val's plan by somehow planting himself as her driver in a limo. God knows how. I know he had the limo business, but I can't imagine she'd have hired him. But anyway, he goes to meet up the team in his banged up limo in order to warn them off of the events that they've just been through. Him telling them that Valentina wanted to kill them, to me, was one of the funnier moments of the film where the humour actually landed for me, so I did appreciate that. Now, you may have noticed that I haven't mentioned Bucky at all yet. Bucky honestly doesn't appear much in the first hour of the film. He has a couple of scenes where we see that he's now a congressman, which was also mentioned in Captain America 4, and it's established that he's using his position and close proximity to Val's assistant Mel in order to get valuable and confidential information, which is how he finds out about the Sentry Project. As the team are escaping from Val's compound in Alexi's beat up limo, a group of mercenaries track them down and try to take them out before Bucky catches up to them and takes out the mercenaries himself. The team are relieved and Alexi's cheering that they've just been saved by the Winter Soldier, but then Bucky disables their vehicle and kidnaps them as well. While captive, the team try to explain to Bucky the whole situation about Bob when Bucky gets a call from Val's assistant Mel, who tells him about Bob and Val's plans for him, and the fact that Bob's mentally unstable, lining up with what the Thunderbolts have just told him. So Bucky sets them free and they go to stop Val and her plans. While this has been going on, Bob wakes up at Val's compound with her by his side. She's convinced him that due to her Sentry project, he's now basically a god. But while they're having the conversation, she touches his hand and gets a flashback to her past. Now, Bob basically has this power that we also saw used earlier in the film on Yelena and Walker, where when people touch him, they basically see kind of a traumatic or bad memory from their past. Yelena's was about a girl named Anya who she had killed in her first mission for the Black Widows, and John's was about his wife and kid and how he was so absorbed in his own failures that he didn't really take care of them properly. Well, that's what the film at least thinks it's trying to tell you, but to be honest, it does a terrible job at it. But I'll talk a bit more about that later on. Val's memory is where she accidentally told someone where she lived who was looking for her father and ultimately ended up coming to the house and killing him. She makes Bob promise that he has to control his powers, to which he agrees, obviously. The Thunderbolts head to the old Avengers Tower, which is now Val's headquarters, and also where she's storing a lot of the Sentry research, which I find absolutely baffling. You've got something that you've spent the entire movie trying to keep secret, yet you keep it in the middle of New York in the tallest and most famous building. Yeah, I don't think so. Thunderbolts head up to Val's watchtower, fighting her guards on the way up before Val tells them over comms that they're invited up anyway and they don't need to fight. This scene basically just felt like they needed to have more fight scenes for the film and for the trailer, so they just did it in the most lazy way possible, where it had no meaning and it wasn't needed at all. Just felt really pointless. The team confront Val, who brings out Bob in his new Sentry costume, which, to be fair, looks pretty good. And the team tries to fight Sentry. He doesn't obviously want to fight and tells them that he'd rather them surrender as they were nice to him previously, but obviously they need to stop Val, so fighting ensues, and Sentry is stupidly overpowered. He easily defeats every single one of them, not surprising considering the skill sets are all basically the same except for Ghost, and the Thunderbolts are forced to retreat. Val orders him to go after them and kill them as they're a threat, but he starts to turn on Val after stating that obviously they're not a threat to him after what had just happened, and he's wondering why he should take orders from her when he's basically a god. Val tries to use the kill switch on him pretty much immediately after this starts happening, which, fair play, you've created an unstable super person who's now turning on you. Of course you'd hit that. But Bob knocks it out of her hand before she can, choking her against the wall before Mel comes in with her own kill switch and activates it. You see Sentry's eyes start to go kind of black, and then he dies. Now, I do want to talk about the kill switch briefly. It was a good idea, it was smart by Val to be honest, but earlier in the film when Val's restarting the Sentry project after finding Bob, Mel says that she destroyed the kill switch and the research on it due to Val wanting to clear everything out and cover her tracks. Val tells Mel to just get it back out of the trash or something like that and then walks off. But then suddenly, after they've fought the Thunderbolts, it's working, it's back in his head, and they have two switches. I mean, maybe it's an implant or whatever that was kind of put in his head when they were doing the original experiments, but even so, earlier in the same day, they said the research and the means to use it was destroyed, and now you've got it working no problem. Yeah, sorry, I'm not having that. After Val and Mel leave the room, Bob's body turns all black, like completely pitch black, all over with just two pinholes of light for eyes. Honestly, it's a really great design. It looked cool and it was quite unsettling, to be honest. Outside the building, the team's basically split up, all thinking that they've failed and they aren't heroes. Yelena walks off and Alexi follows her, with Yelena breaking down, explaining that feels like she has nothing in her life except work, drinking, and being alone. Alexi tries to motivate her and cheer her up, which somewhat works, but then they see Sentry hovering in the sky, now in the form of the Void. This was a phrase used earlier in the film between Yelena and Bob when they were talking about their depression and the emptiness that they feel inside. Bob starts going around the city, turning everyone into shadows. The effect on that was really cool, to be honest with you. I believe it was inspired by the shadows left by the victims of the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombs from World War II as well. The Thunderbolts link back up to help rescue people from the Void, who starts to cover the whole city in darkness. And as it's catching up with the Thunderbolts, Yelena decides to just walk up to it and then into it. The way they did it made it seem like she was just accepting death, as she didn't actually know whether or not she was going to survive going into it. I think their way to try and explain it in the movie was when people touched Bob earlier in the film and saw flashbacks, but I don't think any of the three people that we saw that happen to actually realised for sure that it was him causing it. They probably assumed, and maybe Val did, but even that's up for debate. So yeah, but Yelena basically tries to kill herself right after having a positive talk with Alexei, which is just terrible timing and placement of the scenes in the film. We see Yelena wake up in the void and travel through various memories from her past, including the one from earlier in the film where she has the girl Anya killed as her first Black Widow mission. She tries to fight it and change the outcome, but she can't, and travels through a couple more memories before ending up in a room with Bob. We're now in Bob's traumatic memory, which is about his dad abusing his mum, and then his mum blaming him for making it worse by trying to defend her. Yelena tries to pull Bob out of his depression before the rest of the team show up there too. Like, they just show up. We don't see them go through any of the same thing we saw with Yelena. No memories, nothing to add to anything to their character or backstory. They just show up to help Yelena. The Void shows up and starts to taunt Bob, so they start to fight, with Bob continuously hitting the Void, giving into the darkness, which is exactly what it wants. Then Yelena and the Thunderbolts have a group hug with Bob and tell him that he's not alone, which pulls them out of the Void and returns the city back to normal. Bob's now lost his memory and has no idea what had happened. They conveniently come out of the void just down the road from Val, who's on the phone trying to get an escape plan. They approach her, she goes through a barrier, which they follow through, and turns out there's a load of press there. It was actually a ruse to get them to follow her, and she's actually decided, in order to save herself and a career, to use the press that she's ordered for the Sentry Project to announce the Thunderbolts as the new Avengers. Rather than immediately explain that this isn't the case and take Val away like they were going to, the whole team just stands there stunned before Yelena walks up to Val and tells her that they now own her, which isn't really true. If they were to put Val away, they would also incriminate themselves, which I doubt they would want to do. So, yeah, I'm not sure exactly how that works. And that is how the film ends. But we're not done there. There's two post-credit scenes. Now, the mid-credit scene is a callback to earlier in the film where Alexei was saying how much he wanted his face on the front of a cereal box. Now that they're the new Avengers, his dream has come true. The scene consists of him in a supermarket aisle stood next to the boxes, trying to get a woman to recognise him from the box and failing. It's meant to be funny. It wasn't that funny. And it's just another showcase of how they just use the character as a punching bag for laughs, really. The post-credit scene is a big one, and for the most part insanely stupid. It shows the new Avengers 14 months later in their HQ, and it turns out Sam Wilson isn't too happy with the team being marketed as the new Avengers, seeing as he's been tasked with restarting the Avengers himself. He's even gone as far as to sue them for copyright infringement after trademarking the Avengers name, which I'll talk about more later on. The team gets word of a space crisis and an unidentified spaceship entering the atmosphere. Using the surveillance cameras, they see the aircraft in great detail, and as it turns round, you see the Giant Four on the side. Yes, folks, the Fantastic Four are on the way. So yeah, that was the film. Let's talk a bit about the characters. So we'll get this one out of the way first. Val is a fucking idiot, and so is the writing around her as well. The whole just get the kill switch out of the trash so I can use it in a couple hours is hilariously stupid. The incinerator room that you use to kill highly trained assassins and super soldiers, etc., having a timer inside the room so they know exactly how long they have to escape just to add a bit of tension for the audience is stupid. And the fact that she immediately loses Bob's trust and kills him the second that he starts to turn, setting off the void, is okay, probably what a lot of other people would have done in that situation as well, but it still turned into a terrible and traumatic event for everyone involved. And furthermore, using a press conference to announce to the team that hate you as the new Avengers without their knowledge, when although it would be detrimental to them, they potentially could end your career and definitely end your life if they wanted to. It's just not a smart move. She was annoying, she was poorly written, and I hope she doesn't stick around, to be honest. They could have made her a Nick Fury-esque character, which everyone thought they would, and it would have probably worked much better. Just have Sentry either having been created by someone else or still by Val, but with better intentions and able to explain it way better, and with her being much less reckless, and it probably could have still worked in the story. Yelena was basically the main character in the film. This was essentially her movie, meaning that she's now had two because Black Widow was as much her movie as it was Scarlett Johansson's as well. I liked that they tried to do a mental health theme with both her and Bob, and in some ways it was handled well. But I do wish they delved into it a bit more. It was quite surface level with the solution given in the film, basically being have friends, which doesn't work for everyone. And the thing that annoyed me the most about Yelena was it kind of felt like they didn't really know what kind of character they wanted her to be. Was she someone who was against killing, likes killing, or doesn't care either way? They tried to portray her as a morally good character most of the time, but then in the hallway fight scene at the start of the film from the top down angle, which I thought was a really well done scene to be honest, but she takes out the majority of the guards by hand with no issue, and then shoots the last two dead while they're already down. Why? Is she heartless or not? But other than that, I think she's a pretty solid character in the film. Great performance by Florence Pugh again too. I don't really know what to say about Ghost other than that she's not a hero and she should never be portrayed as one. There was not one heroic trait in her character from Ant-Man and the Wasp. She was a completely villainous character who was just out for herself, to the point where her mentor even stopped helping her. And she has had no development between now and then other than Janet Van Dyne stopping her phase and being out of control. She's given no indication that she's a good person other than coming back to help the Thunderbolts when they thought that she may not come back. But even then it was established that she had to do that to get out of the compound they were trapped in. She was basically just muscle with zero emotional through line in the film. I think the fact a character like this is now an Avenger in the world is honestly the biggest insult from the entire film. Red Guardian is a frustrating one for me. On the one hand, I like David Harbour, and I think that if it wasn't for him, even less people would like the character. But the thing I hate is that they've written him to just be a joke throughout the entire film. Yes, this was an element of his character in the Black Widow movie, but it was not his whole identity. He was still tough when he had to be, and a good soldier, and the humour came out basically from his depression and how he was coping from it. In this film, 90% of his scenes is either him making a joke or him being the butt of one. He gets one or two small sentimental scenes with Yelena, which are purely to progress her character and not his. And that's it. It's a really big waste of a character, and even bigger waste of the actor's talent, if you ask me. John Walker, in my opinion, was probably the best and most well written character in the entire Falcon and Winter Soldier series, even if it was accidental and the show actually wanted you to hate him. The only bad thing he did in the show was kill someone with the shield, but I'm not being funny. Both Sam and Steve have killed people, or at least come close, and Bucky absolutely has. And second to that, the person he killed was involved in a terrorist organisation. Yes, they were terrorists, even if Sam thinks otherwise, and had just been involved in a fight that saw his best friend killed. He was also still getting used to the effects of the super soldier serum that he'd just taken. But in the show, he was a great soldier. He took on the job he was given to protect his country, always wanted to be the best Captain America he could be and the best soldier he could be, had a family and a baby on the way, and had to go through his best friend being murdered in front of him, just to then get beaten up and have his arm broken by Sam and Bucky, who were meant to be on his side, just so they can get the shield back and leave him broken. And then at the end of the show, after fashioning a new and not so very sturdy shield, he rejoins the fight. And then, when he's given a choice between getting revenge for his best friend or saving a bus full of people, he chooses the latter and saves the people. He was a good person that was dealt a bad hand and, yes, made one or two bad decisions, but the show and now this film try to make him out to be a villain and a terrible person, which just isn't the case. He's no more of a villain than Daredevil, Bucky, or even Iron Man. So this film decided to carry on down this route with John. In The Void, he has a scene where he's supposed to be watching his kid, and he's sat right next to the kid's cot, just scrolling through his phone, looking at articles about how he basically failed as Captain America. The kid's crying out a little bit in the cot and making a bit of noise, but there's nothing wrong with him. But the wife comes in and starts kicking off with John, saying that he needs to watch him more. Like, yeah, he wasn't literally staring at him, but the kid was fine. She's just making a big deal out of nothing. John tells her that if she isn't happy, then she can do it herself, and he leaves. But this is basically the last we see of this. There's no resolution for John or for us as an audience. They basically just say, yep, he did that and left it. What was the point? At least give the man a resolution to this at the end of the movie where he's trying to make amends or something. As it turns out, his wife's actually left him and divorced him shortly after this. Most of John's story and actions are fairly relatable, especially with the mental health aspect that they just slightly touched on with him in this film. So it's frustrating that they keep treating him like this when he's one of the best characters that Marvel have post Endgame. Yeah, so Taskmaster just gets yeeted out of this movie in about 10 minutes for just no reason. She's just shot in the head. No redemption for her after being freed from her father's mind control at the end of the Black Widow movie. She's never had a life for herself, and now she never will. R.I.P. Taskmaster, killed by a villain who's now an Avenger. There's just no justice in this world. Bob was actually quite a good character and one of the better parts of the movie. Lewis Pullman played him absolutely brilliantly, and he had quite a compelling story and in a conflict. I just wish they delved a little bit further into the mental health aspect of his character in a bit more detail, as there was a lot of potential there, and it was all felt quite surface level. But I did like that he realised in about 5 minutes that he didn't need to listen to Val. Actually, quite realistic, so fair play. But now, obviously, he can't use his powers, otherwise the Void might take control again. So who knows what will happen with him in the future? But we are confirmed to be seeing him again in Doomsday, so let's see what happens. Bucky was a really frustrating one. His entire purpose in the film was to provide information and transport for the rest of the team. In the first hour, we see him like twice, both to obtain information that he can use to help the team from Val's assistant. His character doesn't progress at all, other than that he's now a congressman for some reason. It was teased in Captain America Brave New World, but it seems like it was, again, just so he could, as an excuse to deliver information to the team in this film. Okay, let's move on to talk about the good and the bad parts of the movie, and we'll start with the bad. Obviously, I've already talked about how stupid it is having the timer in the incineration room, so I won't go on about that again. Same with the whole kill switch situation and how they track Bucky. Let's start with Yelena's flashbacks first, specifically the one where she gets the girl Anya killed. What was the lesson supposed to be from that for Yelena? Don't kill people, it's bad. Did she ever learn that? It's so unclear and it's never expanded on further. There's the scene where Val arrives at the secret compound after the team escapes the incinerator room. She tells the leader that she wants their attack to be non-lethal in order to protect Bob, her new asset. The leader of the mercenaries complains about this, saying that he planned for it to be lethal. Like, come on, mate. You've worked your way to this level. Surely you can make a lethal plan non-lethal at short notice. You could pretty much do the same thing, just add capturing on rather than killing. It's just stupid. I also hated how they dealt with Red Guardian in the film, just playing him off for laughs throughout the entire film. But again, I've talked about that already. I don't think it was explained well enough how the void works or exactly where it came from. I'm assuming that it was Bob's inner darkness that managed to harness the Sentry power, but that's just an assumption, and I don't think it was ever confirmed exactly what it is or how powerful it really is. Just that if Bob uses his Sentry powers again, that there's a risk it'll come back. It also seems like the first two people that he ever voided in the lab are still voided, unlike the rest of the world, again with no explanation provided, so sucks to be them, I guess. The whole film looked quite dark and grey, which I get as an aesthetic choice, but it just looks so bland for a Marvel movie. However, I do appreciate the fact that they used a lot of real world sets compared to most of the recent films. But the thing that I hated most about this film is how they dealt with them becoming the new Avengers in the first place. I think both in universe and in a meta sense, it's an absolutely terrible idea. Firstly, three of the characters have the exact same skill set in Bucky, John Walker, and Red Guardian. Yelena's also just a fighter, but more stealthy and less strong. And Ghost can fight and walk through walls. But it's just not an effective super team, not for the Avengers anyway. One to deal with more covert operations, absolutely. But the Avengers saving the world from extinction level threats, yeah, sorry, not happening. They barely dealt with Bob, and if they hadn't met him before he became the Void, they'd have been fucked. And to have Sam Wilson, of all people, trademark the Avengers name and try to sue them is a terrible decision. It's not something he would do, especially after 14 months from the announcement, and I don't believe that he wouldn't be trying to have a constructive conversation with Bucky. So they've managed to further ruin a character that wasn't even in the film. Right, I think that's enough of the bad. Let's move on to the better stuff of the film to finish off. For the most part, I thought the acting in this film was good. David Harbour was great, and his character would have been nothing without his performance. Florence Pugh also put in a good performance, but for me, the standout was Lewis Pullman as Bob. He managed to capture all of the emotion his character went through really well, and it was a truly solid performance. Unfortunately, and no offence, but it seemed like Sebastian Stan kind of phoned in this performance as Bucky. It was still good seeing him, but it just seemed like he didn't really care that much, which, to be honest, I don't blame him. His character had the potential for a great arc post Endgame, but now he's been made a congressman and isn't even in half of the film where his character is probably the biggest draw. It just seems a strange decision to me. I did think the Void was a cool villain. I do wish they explored the why and how in a bit more detail, but yeah, overall, very solid villain. Obviously not Thanos level, but one of the better MCU villains for sure. And with the mystery around his memory, who knows what will happen with him moving forward. Red Guardian also had a few funny moments. I didn't think a lot of the film's jokes and humour landed for me personally, but the ones that did were almost always David Harbour, especially with the scene where he was ripping up the pillow and calling it evil, and also the scene where he was shouting to the group about Val wanting to kill them after they've already escaped. They did make me chuckle. I also appreciate that they at least tried to have some character work in this film rather than the characters just doing exactly what the plot needs them to do at any given time. Even if the only real character development was with Bob and Yelena to a certain degree, it's a nice change that there was actually something and it didn't just feel like an empty superhero flick. There was a bit of heart, and the whole theme of mental health was definitely a good addition. And finally, there actually felt like there was a bit of cohesion between the films with this and the Captain America 4 film. There was a few mentions of the events of Cap 4 in this film, including Ross turning into Red Hulk and then obviously the conflict with Sam in the post-credits scene. It finally felt like there was some kind of overarching story in this supposedly connected universe. There's obviously been the odd token mention, like the Miss Marvel references in Daredevil, but this is the first time since Spider-Man No Way Home and Doctor Strange 2 that it felt like there has actually been any kind of lasting effect between one film and another, so fair play for that. So overall, for me, this film was a very mixed bag. There were some elements and characters that I thought were handled really well, and others that I thought were handled poorly. But in all honesty, it was one of the better post-Endgame movies. I wouldn't go as far to say it was a return to form, but I'd probably put it fourth in the post-Endgame films, ranking behind Spider-Man: No Way Home, Guardians 3, and Deadpool and Wolverine. But that's just my opinion, and it'd be great to hear yours. So if there's anything you agree with, disagree with, or just anything that I've missed out, please pop it in the comments below to let me know. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It's still quite a new channel, so it really would be a big help. Right, that's all from me. Catch you later, guys.